we are looking at the national picture. We at the National Results Operations Center, so we're looking at the complete picture. But I also just want to bring into the fray our analyst this morning, Dr Sithembile Mbete, as well as Dr Ongama Mtimka. Thanks so much for coming through this morning.
Thanks for having us. It's an exciting time to be here.
So if we look at 8.5% of the vote now complete, that's 1,980 of the 23,293 voting districts completed. And with that, the ANC 41% so far, the DA 27%, the EFF 7%. If we're rounding off, they're on 42, 28 and 8% as the top three at this point. So looking at what comes after that, we have further down the MK. They on 7.54%, not far behind the EFF at this point, and the Patriotic Alliance on 4.56%, followed by the Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, ACDP, Action SA, CCC, and then the UDM and Good and ATM. Any surprises? What are you making of this early picture here, Dr. Mtimka?
So I think it's important to note that these numbers are way higher than any of the polls that we have seen so far. So they give us a really good representative sample of the country. We know that they're going to change in significant ways because also it's important to see where these results come from. But if it's an aggregated national picture at this stage, it's really amazing. For me, at face value, it's amazing how it's beginning to align with some of the pollsters, but it's a picture that's going to change. But it's important anyway.
It certainly is. Dr. Mbete, your view on what we are seeing, the early signs, but of course we know there's still a lot that's going to happen. We know that there are new entrants here, so it's going to be quite interesting to try and see how they trend in this election.
Yeah, so great showing for the MK so far. And them really almost being neck and neck with the EFF, just slightly behind the EFF. So really strong entrance for the MK. We're seeing that there's more. There's just been an update.
Another round.
And so the MK performance coming in really strongly. We've seen results coming in from KZN that are showing just how well the MK seems to be doing in KZN, and taking support not just from the ANC but also from smaller parties in KZN, which I think is what's really making a big impact there as well. The PA making a very strong showing, and I think that what's really interesting is that if you look at the first two parties, so the ANC, DA, EFF, which were the three biggest parties in 2019, the fourth and the fifth party are new parties completely that weren't represented in 2019. So the smaller parties from 2019 we can see far further back behind these two new entrants. And then last thing is that it looks like the DA is actually clawing back support from the Freedom Front Plus. We saw in 2019 and again in 2021 where the DA lost quite a lot of support to the Freedom Front Plus, and it looks as though it's been able to take back some of that support, and we're seeing that the VF Plus is at 2.34%, which is, I think, slightly lower than they were wishing to be.
If I can just, after we heard that bell going off, just update us a little bit in terms of where we're at. So not much more, but it's 85% of the votes that have been completed now. And
8.5%.
Sorry, 8.5%. I beg your pardon. I'm looking at these. This is a numbers game. So where the ANC is sitting at 249,045 of those votes, the DA 164,061, and the EFF 46,015. And ladies and gentlemen, the MK party are just 2,000 votes behind, less than 2,000 votes at this stage behind the EFF at 44,980. That's the MK party, and we can't even pinpoint it to KZN because they're having a show in almost every single province. Mtimka, what do you think about this? I mean, the performance of the MK party in all of this?
Well, it's really surprising. Actually, a spirited showing for the MK party. Very interesting, the results from the areas in the Eastern Cape closer to KZN. I saw in Bizana, for example, where they in one VD, they got about 10%. Which is really an interesting showing for them. I think also in that entire area in the Eastern Cape, up until the OR Tambo region, we expect them to do significantly well over there. It's going to be interesting how the picture emerges during the day. But here is a very interesting thing for me, and I compare South Africa with Malawi at this stage, that Julia, while we cheer on the MK party having had a state president, former state president, as its leader, and it's neck and neck with the EFF, what we cannot take away from the contribution that being a state president does to a new party, it's quite interesting. I mean, we've seen in Malawi, for example, obviously they're using a presidential approach where it's not uncommon there, if there's a split in an organization, the person who goes from the opposition and founds a political party ends up moving and actually being the president in 3 presidential cases now. So for me, as much as I commend how President Zuma is taking support, I think we must cut Julius Malema and his organization building capabilities a slack. So that he has a former president who's neck and neck with him, it's interesting, but also, I think that politically, Julius Malema and the EFF have done significantly well here.
Dr. Mbete.
Yes, something that I just want to highlight is that what we are seeing here on screen and what we're reporting that's being updated quite quickly on the IEC site is the national ballot results. The regional ballot results, those audited results are coming in somewhat slower. So when we're saying that these are the complete National Assembly result hasn't come through yet. We can't say completely what that result is. So the stuff that we were talking about yesterday, about the possibilities of vote splitting, where people will vote one way in the national ballot and a different way in the regional ballot, we don't know yet what those dynamics are and what those trends are, because we don't have enough of the regional ballots that have been counted and audited and declared by the IEC, and I think that's an important thing to remember.
Well, it certainly is, and to that point, if you look, for example, and I just want to go to the provincial picture, and our viewers might be wondering why we're all sitting here looking as
devices.
if we're playing Candy Crush or something. We're not. Trust me, we're not playing Candy Crush. It's just because the results are being updated so quickly, and we try to keep you abreast of what is happening on these screens. So that's what's happening. That's why we're all looking down. So with that said, if we speak to that point that you just made, Dr. Mbete, KwaZulu-Natal, for example, at this point we're on 0.8% still. So it's very low, it's minuscule. And that being said, though, even then, we expect this to be a stronghold for MK. And they are already in the lead, even with less than 1% of the vote. The ANC with 25.17%, and IFP at this point, 15.49%. And that's followed by the DA, the EFF, the NFP, which are the parties that are expected to show in that province generally.
Yes, definitely. And so I think that we are seeing that the trend seems to be aligned with what we've seen from the national ballot. I think what's going to be then, and we did expect actually the MK to make a very good showing in the KZN regional ballot and in the provincial legislature as well. I think that the trend that we're wanting to see now is how that translates all over the country and in different provinces, because something that we're going to see in this election that we haven't seen since 1994 is a huge amount of provincial differentiation. Very different trends from province to province and even from different parts of provinces. And I think that regional element in the way that the vote is being differentiated across the country is really going to make it's going to be fascinating to see how that impacts.
One that I'm looking at, which is quite fascinating, is, and I think this is probably the most far ahead in terms of voting, is in Mpumalanga. They're sitting at 10.2% of the votes that have been counted at this point, so that's 186 of the voting districts of 1,811. Here's your picture. ANC, 32,144 in first place. Second place, the MK party at 8,938, and then the EFF with 7,595. So as you're saying, you know, the reality is that you certainly do have the showings of all over that we have to take into consideration here. Every province is telling a story, and the question I want to ask you though, and I know you alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, the MK party's votes, where are they coming from? Are they being taken from the ANC? Is it the EFF? Is it the DA? Is it from everybody? Or can we honestly say that actually it's more of a disgruntled ANC voter that's moved over to the MK?
Look, it seems to be that it is, so it's a big disgruntled ANC voter, but then also that protest vote that was going to other parties, so that was going to the EFF, that was going to the IFP, that was maybe going to COPE in the Eastern Cape, that vote is now gone to the MK. So the MK is consolidating, or is taking from a lot of the smaller parties where people would have voted for those parties as a protest from the ANC, but it's also taking votes from the ANC, and I think that is a real big contributor to, so the MK is taking from all sides, it's not just taking from one, and I think that's what's going to contribute to the surge.
And looking at this early picture though, you know, if you look at that Mpumalanga picture, for example, at 10.27% complete, MK, so you've got the ANC at 56.99, 57%. Then you've got MK at 15.85%, 16%, then followed by the EFF at 13.47%. This is one of the provinces where the EFF is in complete opposition. In opposition, I just got thrown there. The bell. Seconds out, another round as Leanne checks what's happening with the update.
10% of the votes in now.
10% in.
Yeah.
So
10.02. We have moved very fast.
Just on that point. That means stay put, don't go anywhere. We may be able to go on with the CSIR prediction before the end of Morning Live. If not, we'll go into the agenda, but stay with us here on SABC News. It's not Morning Live and agenda anymore.
Not at all.
It's SABC elections coverage, wall to wall. So sometimes difficult to remember that we are all one team. All right, but coming back to the MK story, and looking at what's happening in a province like Mpumalanga, for example. So, Dr. Mbete, you say that the MK is taking from everybody, but the ANC seems to be holding their own still at this point. I know it's early days, the ANC does seem to be holding its own, but it seems like the EFF may be the party that may be on these early results are the party that are taking the hits.
So if I may, two things why that is an interesting trend. Because the wave of support for the EFF from 2014 and 2016 was an anti-Zuma or anti-Zuma ANC wave of support. From 2019, the EFF started getting support from an anti-Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC. Now, what could be happening here is that support base had gone to the EFF to kind of remain there because there was no clarity within the ANC as to where the RET faction was going to build outside of the ANC. And those are voters who could not actually wait. And I say this, Sakina, because if you look at the changes between an Ipsos poll from December last year as well as one of the latest released, I think in April, you see an entire 8% moving from the EFF to the MK party, while the ANC lost about just 1% to account for what the MK party got. So my sense is that these votes that had gone to the EFF are coming back to ANC light which is Mkhonto weSizwe.
Or will they? As we said, it's early days yet. This is, of course, a developing story. These numbers are in flux.
The big thing, though, we're more than 80 times more than the polls that we've received. So from a reliability point of view, we are no longer playing with, we are
now talking to the real numbers.
Solid numbers.
We need to take a break, but as we go to that break, looking at the provincial legislature in the Eastern Cape, 3.74%, ANC, DA, EFF making up the top three, and coming in at number 4 here in the Eastern Cape at this point, the UDM followed by the MK and the PA.
All right, so things are moving very fast here in these elections. We had been at a dead standstill for a while, but now that bell is ringing constantly and we're seeing updates all of the time. So you want to stay with us, because hopefully we'll also start getting proper predictions from the CSIR, who may be joining us shortly. So do stay tuned. We'll take a break. See you after this.
Can't wait.